Agamya. Here's a fun tidbit about me is that I really love animals. I've had an affinity for it for a very long time now. I've dabbled in horse riding a bit, but I couldn't really continue. But I still do have a hankering for it. I do hope to dive in back someday and learn horse riding professionally. I also hope that if everything goes well and fine, I wish to have an animal farm of my own someday because of the love I have for animals. I really love dogs. I love cows as well. So yeah.
Super. That's very interesting. You're definitely like more passionate about animals than myself. For me, it's sort of 50-50. But that's good to know. I hope you get back into like horse riding as well.
Uh-huh.
Someday to sort of introduce you to listeners more formally. That's
Mhm.
Agamya Yogaraj. She's a junior at SP Jain, the School of Global Management, where she's pursuing business administration and she's focusing in on finance now that she's entering her third year. So today we'll be hearing more from her about choices she's made, lessons she's learned along the way, as well as I'm sure there'll be an introduction to of just an SP Jain 101 for anyone who hasn't heard about SP Jain, and for anyone who has heard about SP Jain, we'll also be diving deeper into sort of life, authentic life as an SP Jain student. There's a lot of interesting aspects of the SP Jain model and the 4-year university curriculum, which will also be like diving deeper on. So welcome to Uni Unveiled. I'm your host, Arya Road. I currently study at Minerva University. Welcome, Agamya. Excited to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Super. I will sort of, when I heard about SPJ, it was sort of a new name.
Hmm.
I went to the official website, went down a few rabbit holes. I want
Hmm.
to give a quick intro to listeners about SPJ, and then you'll obviously be taking it much more forward. Uh,
Hmm.
but apart from being a business school and a management school, one of the top ones, what I find most interesting, especially from Minerva, where we are a traveling university, that SP Jain is also a traveling university. So
Hmm.
that was a big surprise. That's the big surprise of like SP Jain is that over the 4 years, you spent a year in Dubai, a year in Singapore, and then for the third and fourth year, you have an option of either going to Sydney for 2 years or London for 2 years. You've chosen to go to Sydney. In fact, you're flying off in just a few days. So that's a quick SPJ in 101. We'll be talking a lot more about why the three different cities are important, how that affects your education. First question I want to start with is why do you think SP Jain, from a college perspective, wants its students to be in three different countries versus just spending like 4 years in one city, which is like how most colleges work?
I think it's really important for business students because I am studying business and the main course offered in SPJN is business, the Bachelor's of Business Administration program. I think it's very imperative for business students to be equipped with, a business education that provides that sort of a global exposure. Because I personally have always believed, my grandfather usually tells me that, travel is the ultimate education. Like you literally get to broaden your horizons there. So in that way, yeah. And from an academic perspective, I think the job market today is like shifting sands. So it's very important for you to have an understanding of how the world works, not just in your place, but from a cultural perspective. So in that way, I think this sort of global exposure really will have some sort of knock-on effects when I step into the corporate world. So I think this is what SPJN is really looking forward to, equipping their students with. Yeah.
I think I completely agree. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
the thing I slightly disagree with is I think this kind of traveling is not only useful for business majors, but for any major.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
like I am not a typical business major. I have a lot of friends who aren't,
Okay.
but I think everybody at Minerva benefits from going to the different cities. And so
Correct.
as you rightly said, like travel is one of the best forms of learning. There's a lot of like hidden learnings of just like having to move base every 1 year, every 2 years. Learning like from new cultures, meeting new people. Those are all like learnings outside the classroom, is what I refer to them as.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like university is a balance between what you learn in the classroom and outside the classroom as well. Uh,
Yeah, sure.
I want to actually talk about outside the learning classroom with you a little bit. You've already spent a year in Dubai and a year in Singapore. Um, what did you actually learn from those two places? Like, how did you see your business course concepts applied on the ground in these two very, very global and very interesting cities?
I think the way how it goes outside the classroom mainly is we have this initiative called the Global Learning Program. So what they do is every week we're taken to the nooks and crannies of the city that we're living in. Like when it was Singapore, we explored Singapore. When it was Dubai, Dubai. That way, we really get the opportunity to sort of make the acquaintance of local folks. We get to sort of hobnob with the local businesses, the industry experts in the local area, and just to experience their culture. So mingling with them, encourages plurality of thoughts. It sort of expands our understanding of different backgrounds, of different perspectives. So that is their main way of making us understand the culture and immersing and having that sort of an immersive experience, if I could name it like that. Yeah.
So if I'm understanding correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, is that
Mhm.
a lot of your learning is going on through field trips? So you're sort of going outside the classroom with the professor, maybe like visiting a business or like talking to an entrepreneur, and that's how
Mhm.
you're like learning, and that's how you're connecting it back to your classroom learning. Do you think I sort of captured that?
Yeah, yeah, perfectly. Yes.
Awesome. I think this is interesting even to someone. This is a question I'm curious to ask you. Plus, I
Uh-huh.
think it's interesting for someone who's maybe not going to SPGM but making the
Mhm.
choice between like Australia versus the UK. And so maybe if I were in your position, I might have like it might have been 51 London, 49 Sydney. So I might very well have actually gone to London. I'm
Mhm.
curious why you chose Sydney versus London.
And this is actually a very tough question because I recall even I personally, I was standing at crossroads when it came to choosing between London and Sydney. I think both cities are on par when it comes to lifestyle and education. So it was definitely a very tough call. Sydney had a bit of an edge for me because I'd already explored so much of it on the web before joining SP Jain. When I joined SP Jain, SPJ London wasn't an option then. It was recently opened. I think it's just been a year now. So that was one of the reasons I'd already sort of subconsciously developed a bias towards Sydney because I've explored so much of it. But even when the option was offered to us, I did do an intensive research on both the cities. Ultimately what I've realized is both cities are very great for students, but I think it totally depends on your personal choices and preferences at the time. For me, I absolutely love Sydney's sort of laid back vibe, the beaches, the pleasant weather throughout that's there. And I agree with you, I totally concur with you when you say London has its own like attractions. A lot of students would prefer UK for their further education, but for me, from the recent news, and I've heard that London has sort of slid into a recession. So I had a bit of trepidations when it comes to their job prospects and other opportunities post graduation. So that is one of the main primary reasons why I chose to go to Sydney. But maybe for the post graduation, I'd love to explore London as well. You never know.
Okay, sounds good.
Mm.
Yeah, so sort of you're getting the best of both. Maybe the master's or the PhD is in London, depending on
Yeah.
sort of what your future plan is.
Mhm.
Um, from I know from a personal point of view and a fun point of view, I'm
Mhm.
sure there's so much to do in Sydney that we could like. That's a podcast in itself. What I want to talk to you about Sydney is sort of more from an academic or a professional point of view. What are you looking forward to doing in Sydney now that you've got 2 full years in Sydney?
Mhm. One of the main things is like I have heard about the people in Sydney. I've heard that they're very effervescent, very amiable. So I really am looking forward to sort of develop connections with them to network. Uh, our dean often mentions that your net worth is your net, or your network is your net worth.
Hmm.
So I'm really looking forward to developing that sort of a camaraderie there. And who knows if one day I can partner with them for some business or something. It's still a prospect. So that is one of the main things I'm looking forward to. Apart from that, I can only tell you after I go to Sydney what advantages
Hmm.
it has, how it has helped me. But as of now, I'm really looking forward to that, to immerse myself
Hmm.
in that culture and with the people.
No, absolutely. And I love that quote. I've said it like maybe 3 or 4 times already on previous episodes
Okay.
about network being the net worth. I think
Mm-hmm.
the beauty of like SP Jain or Minerva is
Mm-hmm.
you've got networks in like Dubai, in Singapore, and in Sydney. And you've got friends who have networks in London.
Yeah.
Our case, we're gonna have networks across 6 different cities. I think that is awesome,
Yeah.
both from a personal point of view, in that we have friends from different
Mm-hmm.
parts of the world, but also professionally, if tomorrow for whatever reason I want to like go and do a startup in Berlin, I'm gonna know
Mhm.
people in Berlin after I graduate from Minerva.
Yeah.
Versus having a network which is more specific to one city or one country, which is what I'm assuming many people will have after they graduate from a more traditional university.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we've been talking some macro higher level stuff about sort of the benefits of SPJ and the traveling. What I
Mm-hmm.
also didn't realize before Minerva is that logistically this is not that easy, sort of especially for us in terms of going to six cities, visas and accommodation and housing and food. There's a lot of like smaller logistics issues that comes in.
Mm-hmm.
I want to clarify a few basic logistics questions with you. Maybe if
Mm-hmm.
there's an apprehension for some listener of the podcast, this should be
Mm-hmm.
with clarity. Question one is, does SP Jain have its own campuses in each of the cities, or do you like partner with local universities?
No, no. It's completely like SP Jain has their own campus. We have it in Mumbai, in Singapore, Dubai, Sydney, and now London. So they have their own campuses. There's no partnering that goes on there.
Perfect. And so does that mean that you've got different set of professors for like pretty much each year or every 2 years? Like you're shifting professors completely? Because I'm assuming the professors don't move from like campus to campus.
No, no, there's no traveling between campuses for the faculty. So we have different professors for each locations, but sporadically they do come for specialized courses. Sometimes there is a bit of moving. Like we have had the same professor once or twice for the same for some courses, but it's not the usual case. No.
Hmm. Actually, I would love to hear a bit more about this. I think having a completely different set of professors every year is also valuable because you're learning from so many different people and perspectives. So, do you want to actually say a bit more about how that has been valuable? Like, why it's been valuable to you to be having like a completely different set of professors and then a completely different set and then a completely different set?
100%. I think there's so much to gain from each of our professors because we don't have professors from one certain country. We have it. We have like a lot of different nationalities of professors. All of them are seasoned professors, so they know what they're doing. So I think it really helps us sort of you know develop a new totally different perspective because you're getting insights from different upbringings and different cultures and different understandings of different courses. So it's sort of it's good like that. And also I think it sort of diminishes the gap between theoretical learning and practical experience, because while they're teaching a specified course, they're also sort of amalgamating their personal experience with that course, because they all do have some sort of experience in whichever field they're teaching us. If you have a consulting professor, they have some experience in the consulting field. They've worked for companies in consulting. So that's how we get that, it's a window to how companies work as well. So yeah, it's
Hmm.
really good. Yeah.
I'm hoping this next question, maybe it sounds a bit repetitive, but I'm hoping this really gets at the root because even I've said this on the podcast and I sort of have an answer myself, but I want to hear
Mhm.
it from you.
Mhm.
Why is it actually like how is your experience actually different when you've got professors from different countries versus like all Indian professors or all American professors? Like, how do you see the difference in the classroom when you've got a professor from like Dubai or Singapore or Brazil or like different countries? Is the like class dynamics actually different?
It is for sure because till 12th I was used to getting taught only by Indian professors. So I think even their approach to teaching is very different. The Indian approach versus the approach from the international professors. We do have a few Indian professors in SP Jain, but they have sort of adopted this international
Hmm.
version of teaching, where our their teaching approach is like very strongly footed on both the theoretical and the pragmatic aspect of subjects. So they're even like they give a lot of importance to not just learning something but actually applying it in real life. Whereas the Indian professors, no complaints, but my slight gripe with the Indian education in itself, I don't think it has to do with professors, because the professors are just a result of how the system is, right? So I think the gripe is that it focuses a lot on rote learning and then just sort of vomiting the same on standardized tests and exams.
Hmm.
But it restricts us to the four walls of the classroom. But here with our professors, with international professors, I think they take us beyond that classroom. They help us immerse in real world experience, which I think is very essential for any education, not just a business education, but for any, but especially a business education.
Hmm.
So yeah.
I think you touched quite a few bases which like I would have otherwise touched upon in terms of
Mhm,
the answer to that question. Maybe
mhm,
the last thing I'll add here is even at an American university where let's say there's not that issue of rote learning, I
mhm,
still would love to have. I think a professor brings a lot of examples from their ethnicity and their culture in their country. And so, if
mhm,
I'm taking a political science course, I would love to
mhm,
have not just an American view on politics and how that works,
mhm,
but like
mhm,
different worldviews. And so, the beauty is when I have, like, we've got a Brazilian economics professor at Minerva, and
mhm,
she brings in a lot of aspects of like a more developing, a more third world country and how economics work there versus like a first world country like the US. So I feel like those personal examples they bring in, personal anecdotes and stories are very different by culture in terms of even how economics is viewed in US versus India versus Brazil versus like different countries. Similar to business, I'm sure like business is very context dependent. I'm sure you've sort of like learned over the years. And so last logistical question, maybe this is like a question mark for someone listening, is about
mhm,
visas. I know that's a
mhm,
huge challenge with Minerva, especially with a lot of people from around the world is sort of acquiring visas for all these different countries based on current like geopolitics.
mhm.
I'm guessing, especially for an Indian student, Dubai and Singapore are relatively easier. Maybe City and London are a bit harder. But the question is sort of what support is SPJ in giving you in terms of acquiring the visas?
As for visa logistics, I think SPGN does take care of the entire process for both Singapore and Dubai. So they're very solicitous about us like that. So it's never really been such a hassle. But Australian visas, they do partner with agencies, and then those agencies help us streamline the visa acquisition. So procuring visas isn't really a task because the university is, lends a hand in that. So it's never been a huge task, no.
Awesome. I think now that we've clarified basic logistics for listeners, I sort of this model also works on the ground. Is what I'm hoping the message we're delivering here is. What I want to do is actually rewind a few years in time, get back to high school Agamya, and walk through a few more macro decisions you made. Um,
Mhm.
First decision, and this is a big one, is sort of what do I want to study in college? And this is a big question mark. Probably until 12th grade, I was pretty confused. And so, for all the potential business students listening to the podcast, I think your perspective would be valuable to hear. What actually drew you to study business administration in undergrad?
When I was doing 11th and 12th, business wasn't really in my head. And I also don't think it was ever the business part that sort of intrigued me. It was more about administration that sort of compelled me to, opt for business administration. I personally belong to a family of doctors and engineers. So
Hmm.
usually we don't really have the liberty to explore the labyrinth of career choices because we're expected, to choose to become a doctor or engineer. That's even normal for our family to consider. Business is never in our heads. With my affinity for biology, I medicine appealed to me, but I think I started contemplating throughout 11th and 12th if I was really doing the right choice. And I started acknowledging that I was often recognized for my leadership skills and also for my gregarious personality. So that's when I started to refine medicine to hospital administration slowly because I couldn't, suddenly change it from medicine to business. So I thought hospital administration first, but then I also started realizing that maybe my interest lies in business and management and not towards hospital administration. I didn't want to restrict that part. So that's how I came to choose this business course. Yeah.
Hmm. I've had a decent amount of Indian students on the podcast. And in fact, I've had a few conversations where we talked about someone coming from a pure engineering or medicine family and then like trying to convince parents that no, I want to do business or finance. And so what I want to ask you is, was this a challenge? And what was the process of telling them that no, like this is what I want to do. I'm not going to be an engineer. I'm not going to be a doctor. I want to get into business.
For me, it was two factors. It was not just convincing them that I want to do business, but also that I wanted to pursue it outside the country, right? So, two big shocks that they weren't expecting, that they never predicted. So, I think I'm the only child. So, convincing my parents, especially my mother, to let me study abroad, it was no small feat. My friends are still surprised. They often ask me about how my mother, out of all people, because she's the most overprotective mother in the world.
Hmm.
So how did she let you outside? Because it would take days for me to convince her for a birthday party or for a school trip even.
Hmm.
So, and here I was begging and pleading her to, let me pursue education abroad. So I think it was me, the whole idea of me studying abroad was a hard sell. But I mean, it's very natural for all parents to be concerned, right? I think the challenge came in while I had to show them that I wasn't just chasing some fleeting dream, but I was actually committed to this cause, that I really wanted this from the depth of my heart, that I really was passionate about business. So I think I had to demonstrate to them, not just through words, but through actions, that I was ready for this leap.
Hmm.
So it came in there. And I also, in terms of like studying abroad, I did constantly reassure them that I would stay connected, because that would sort of ease their, worries. So, for anyone, I think, who wants to convince their parents about studying abroad or about choosing a career that is not planned for them by their parents, my suggestion is to sort of try to find a balance between, proving your readiness, between proving your passions, and also addressing their concerns with that sort of empathy and sensitivity, because they're your parents after all. They're going to be dubious about all this, about suddenly sending you to abroad. And the concern for you, I think it's coming from a place of concern. So I think they'll eventually agree, but it just comes down to how ready are you for it and how much of your passion can you demonstrate to them. I think once they know that you are passionate about this, they'll let you do it. Yeah. So.
Hmm. You went ahead and answered the next question that was on my mind, which is sort of advice to someone who's actually wanting to convince parents about either a career path or studying abroad.
Mhm.
And I'm completely in agreement with you there.
Mhm.
Sort of one is finding a common ground. I think two is also not just telling them you're ready, but somehow showing them you're ready. And so if
Exactly.
that means sort of being punctual, being responsible, not losing stuff, showing them that you can like travel alone, maybe doing a
Mhm.
small India solo trip, 5, 6 days. I can stay on my own, whatever that looks like, for your parents to be like, yes, he or she is ready. Because sometimes our words sort of don't mean anything, but the actions become like very important and crucial. Um,
Also, to add on to that, even your financial decisions, you have to start showing them that you're able to make responsible financial decisions. I think when they let you abroad, there is a huge responsibility in your hands. So, I often have been told that privilege also comes with responsibility. So, to be able to, balance the both is very, very essential.
Okay, yeah, very good,
Mhm.
Anna. Speaking about sort of financial decisions from business, you narrowed down to finance. I know this can be a challenge for many people, which is sort of, do I want to do finance, marketing, operations, HR, something else? What led you from like the more macro field of business to actually know that finance is something you want to specialize in at SPGN?
One of the main things that I even considered while joining SP Jain was that they offered a finance major, because for me it was never really business administration. It was particularly specializing in finance. But also, I think it comes from a confluence of factors, because finance is like the backbone of any business, right? It's where a lot of the main action happens. So I've always wanted to be in the middle of that. So it seemed more kind of finance offers that unique vantage point, if you get what I'm saying. So I think it gives you the hand in decision making in a company, which is always what I've sort of looked forward to.
Hmm.
So that plus the chance to understand the nitty gritty of stock markets, of investments, that's something that I've always been intrigued about, even on a personal note, because I think earning money is not just the important part, but to know where to put it, it's more important, because that's how the growth is happening today. That's how you grow your money, right? Multifold. So yeah, I think that's the reason I chose finance,
Hmm.
and I hope I like it. I'm still to major. I mean, I haven't started, but yeah.
I'm a big believer in like this concept of personal finance, and I feel like
Hmm.
everyone should take a finance class at university, regardless of whether you're doing like computer science or literature or anything in between. Um, for you, it's a professional point of view. I feel like business as a subject has like so many personal applications as well, and so I genuinely am just a huge advocate of like everyone should do a marketing class, everyone should do a finance class, everyone should do an entrepreneurship class at university. More than what you learn, I think it's like the skills you develop in terms of, let's say, your finance degree is teaching you like good math skills or good like reasoning skills, logic, planning. I think those are more important, even beyond sort of the physical course content. Is what I'll add there.
For
Um,
sure.
what what I want to spend a bit of time with you on. I know this is probably also like half a memory test because your application was quite a while back. But just so we're clarifying for listeners, at a very high level, can you walk us through the different components of your application to SP Jain?
Honestly, I don't remember the details of it. It's been 2 years, but I can help you navigate the bare bones of the application process of SP Jain. To begin with, I remember gathering all the documents. That's the first step to apply to any university. Like you get your academic transcripts, you get your exam scores, your 10th and your 12th mark sheets. I also had to polish my resume because till 12th, the resume doesn't hold that much importance anywhere. But when you apply to a university, I think they do look into your resume very meticulously. We were asked to write some essays, I think, and an SOP as well, statement of purpose.
Hmm.
I got a couple of recommendations from my professors before, from my principals, and from other people. After this, I think, yeah, we had to do the SPJ entrance test. We had to attempt it. After that, I think we also had an interview by one of the professors, I suppose. I don't recall who did the interview exactly, but I think it was one of the professors who did it. And then I think that should pretty much encapsulate the application process. And then we just waited for the verdict and got the acceptance letter. I think, yeah. But all of this, I have to give a shout out here, which is the admission team of SPJ. They do an incredible job in helping you from the first step to the last. So they always lend a hand in that. So they've been very supportive. Yeah.
Hmm. I don't know. I feel like maybe not all high schoolers know this, and so I just want to bring this out there is that both clarifying questions or even more strategic questions, you can always feel free to reach out to the admissions team while you're working on your application and actually like ask them micro or macro questions. Generally, they're happy to answer, even if they don't answer a question of yours and they tell you that sort of we can't answer this, it's worth a shot. You're not losing anything. But like especially through a long and tedious application where there's many like question marks, it's not as straightforward as like submitting a number like a JEE exam score.
Mhm.
Please reach out to the admissions team and sort of like take their help. That's it. That's literally what their job is at university, sort of helping you through the application and then evaluating it. Um,
Right.
I wanted to throw this out there in case someone is sort of not making use of the admissions team. This goes beyond SPJ, and this is like I think most universities across. I'm glad you clarified the basic high level steps.
Mhm.
Many aspects seem similar to actually a US university application, which is what I'm more well versed with.
Mhm.
Um, what I want to give you an opportunity to do now is, in case there's someone listening who is currently working on their application to SPJ, and I'm
Mhm.
sure there are things which like you realize or you wish you had known before you started the application, which you for some reason realized after. Any
Mhm.
sort of advice or any tips
Mhm.
and tricks you want to share with someone who's currently working on their SPGN application?
I think one thing that I would like to personally change is that I didn't highlight enough of my volunteer work. I mean, I had done a lot, but I think I forgot to mention it. I did somewhere or the other vaguely, but not in detail. So I think many universities do look for a sign of social responsibility. So they would really like for you to, for a disposition that has done such a thing. And also, I think the main thing would be emphasize on like listing your accomplishments, but just not listing them. What I did was I said I won this and this and what competitions, what I had, the courses that I'd done, and all of that. But I think what I was advised to do later on by others is that try to sort of develop a narrative around it, like how those accomplishments have led you to gain a personal character trait, or how it has helped shape your personality or mold your interest or whatever. I think crafting a personal and honest story, I think that always, does some magic to whoever's reading it. So that's there. And yeah, and also like don't try to overwhelm the person with a lot of your accomplishments, because a lot of it currently I've heard is also like that's not true, it's fake, right? So don't they are looking for, they would be carefully looking into that. So that sort of scrutiny, if you want to avoid, just be honest with whatever you're showing. Let there be no gasconading as such.
Hmm.
I think this is all I can recall. These were the minor errors that slipped through the cracks when I applied, but that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I want to double down on sort of authenticity.
Hmm.
One, from a selfish point of view, if there's an interview, they might catch you. If they ever ask for contact info or extra evidence, they might catch you. Number two, and maybe this appeals to like a different set of listeners, but just from a more ethical and a moral point of view, I want to have gotten to a university because I like deserve to be there, not because I tried to be something which I'm not and then I sort of got in. I don't think I would be too like proud or happy of myself even for those 3 or 4 years. That might be a regret even after graduation. And so I think be this is something that's been said in maybe different words, but again and again on the podcast is sort of being yourself and being who you truly are, not trying to be some ideal version of like this is what Harvard expects of me or this is what SP Jain expects of me.
Right.
You that will also help the right university find you versus you just trying
Hmm.
to find the right university in terms of like culture and environment and what kind of students they're looking for. So
Hmm.
just doubling down on this keyword of authenticity. Um,
Yeah.
what I want to wrap
Yeah,
up.
I think to add on to that, I think what most students do is with the eagerness to sort of, align their resume with what the university is expecting, they sort of lose out that personal touch. They lose out their personality while doing it. So I think it's important to make sure that whatever you're writing in your resume or whatever you're answering in the interview, it sort of captures your real personality. So don't lose out on that. That's very important. Yeah.
Mhm. Awesome. That I think that solid add on.
Hmm.
Before we wrap up this first section of the episode and actually jump into life at SPJ and a few more specific areas which we'll dive deeper on, I want to lastly talk to you about you were at a point where you got the acceptance from SP Jain, plus I'm sure you got acceptances from other universities. I'm not sure exactly where you applied, but when you were making the final choice as to where do I want to enroll and where do I want to like dedicate the next 4 years of my life to, we've talked about the traveling aspect. That's a huge pull factor.
Hmm.
Any other specific pull factors for you to SP Jain? Like anything
Hmm.
that's very unique or special about the university?
Yeah, I mean, what only pulled me wasn't the global program part. It was certainly a big, big draw. But I think it has to do with the eclectic range of opportunities SPJN offers. I've already mentioned the global learning part and how the classes are immersive and all of that. But also my gripe with Indian education. So I saw SPJN, giving us the prospect of engaging in immersive projects and immersive classes that goes beyond the four walls of the classroom. I did do extensive consultation. I did review through a lot of review aggregator websites.
Hmm.
Uh, SP Jain appeared to be the ideal choice for me because it aligned a lot with my personal objectives. Uh, and I think what SP Jain mainly does is it helps you. I've already mentioned this multiple times, but it doesn't snow you under with a lot of assignments and projects only. It also helps you go way beyond that. So you're not really becoming academic cockroaches as such. You are actually learning how to work in the corporate world. So I think that part of it focusing more on the pragmatic aspect is what really drew me towards SPJ. Yeah.
Hmm. What we'll do now is we'll
Hmm.
transition and we'll fast forward a bit in time and talk about
Hmm.
your SP James day specifically. You're already
Hmm.
about halfway in. You've covered 2 years. You've got 2 years left. And so
Hmm.
I think I would love to sort of pick your brain on different specific aspects of how SP Jain works on the ground from a student's point of view. And I'm
Hmm.
sure like your answers will have a lot of things beyond what you can find just on the official website. That's why I
Right.
talk about doing podcasts with students.
Hmm.
First thing I would love to talk about, you've already drawn some very clear distinctions between Indian education and you're a CBSE student up till grade
Yeah.
versus how your classes work at SP Chain. And so I want to actually dive deeper and expand on that thought. And can you walk us through how your classes and your courses work at SP Jain in terms of structure, or what do you sort of really enjoy about them?
Well, I think to begin with, the SPGN curriculum is in itself, I've mentioned this again, but it's strongly footed on both theory and real world experience. It's more like imagine learning about financial strategies 1 minute and then sort of jumping into a live project to apply it in the next, right? That is how our classes work. So instead of just reading theories, you're often applying them in real business scenarios. It's more like learning how to cook by actually doing so rather than just, glancing or reading through the recipes. So that's how our classes work. Again, our classes are often a melting pot of perspectives because of the cultural mashup. There are students from so many nationalities coming in. So it gets really interesting and engaging, sometimes argumentative, but it's fun. All of this, I think this entire classroom experience is sort of like having a backstage pass to how the international business stage is right from your classroom desks. So even before you are going into it yourself, you know how it might work for you. So yeah, this is how our classrooms are structured.
Hmm. Speaking about sort of international students and sort of students from different countries,
Hmm.
I have a perception. I could be wrong that it's a
Hmm.
majority Indian students in SP Jain. If I had to ask you to like give very average or high level numbers, what's the ratio of like Indian students to international students, which could be any other country?
I think it's a 50 to 60% of Indians, and the a lot of Asian countries in the other 50%. It covers Vietnam, it covers Pakistan, it covers Philippines, um, China, Japan. Most of the Asian countries. We have a few from the UK. We have few from France, US as well. We have Australians also. So yeah, the other 50% would be a mixture of a lot of other nationalities. Yes.
Hmm. How does that actually play in the classroom on the ground? Like again, if I had to take you one level micro and talk specific details, why
Mhm.
does it matter that your classroom has like Australians and Americans and Vietnamese versus like just Indians?
I think having a diverse classroom is generally a big win, and I really like it. I'm enjoying it like that. But it can also lead to some sort of cultural chasms between people when it comes to working in groups because they come from different working styles. They have different norms. They come from different upbringings, right? So you have a very Indians especially do have the propensity to have a very strong belief system. It's not really easy for us to entertain other cultures and such. I mean, we've brought up in that way, right? So it can cause a bit of a friction. But I think over the duration of the 2 years, we have sort of learned to
Hmm.
adapt and sort of accept their perspective without actually having to, follow it. But you can accept it because it's the way they are coming from, right? So I think it's really, we also had a class about emotional intelligence. We had a specific course. I think there we really learned the importance of being culturally aware and sensitive, especially when you can work somewhere else one day. So it's really important for us to, uh, you know, accept different thoughts. Yeah.
Hmm. What I want to do is actually make a brief list with you.
Mhm.
Uh, I know that for Minerva, there are definitely a certain type of student profile who I genuinely think should like avoid Minerva. Like I don't think they should come here because they
Mhm.
wouldn't thrive in this ecosystem. And so I have my specific bullet points there. What I want to do is do something similar for SP Gene because while a lot of students might thrive in such an environment, multicultural, traveling to different countries, I
Yeah.
think maybe some kind of students should sort of steer clear of SP Gene and maybe they're a better fit in like a different type of institution.
Hmm.
Maybe I can actually get the list started. Number one, from what you just said, is
Hmm.
have to be willing to have a very open mind and sort of
Hmm.
have cultural clashes with students
Yeah.
from different parts of the world. If
Correct.
you're too rigid, maybe you might not thrive at SPG. And now I'll give you the opportunity to sort of add to this list.
Sort of like the cons of SPJ, if I can say. No? So I'm not sure if I have a few hiccups in mind, but I'm not sure if they're unique to SPJ as such. But I mean, other universities can have them as well. I think it's a generic answer, but sometimes the situation can get a bit tricky because we're all about hands-on learning, like I mentioned before, which is awesome. But sometimes it is a double-edged sword. The back-to-back projects, assignments and presentations, sometimes even daily, we have it on a daily basis, can be a bit of a whirlwind. It can leave you pretty cream crackered at the end of the day. So that's one disadvantage.
Hmm.
And most of our assignments are group projects. So if you're not someone who, can adapt to things easily, if you're someone who likes to plan things way before,
Hmm.
my mom is a very organized person. She has everything sorted before the event or whatever happens, way before that. So if you're such a meticulous planner, it can be a bit of a juggling act because you can't always predict how things will go, especially because you have to constantly work with people around you, right? So you're totally relying on others. It's not just how responsible you are, or how you are good with maintaining time. It's also about coordinating your time with everyone, coordinating your plans with everyone. So it feels like trying to herd cats, yeah. And so I would say if you're not a very good team worker, then I think it's better for you to avoid it. But I also think it's very important for us to learn all of these life skills.
Hmm.
Rather than avoiding it, just step out of your comfort zone. And I was the only child. I wasn't used to adapting to this sort of a lifestyle, but I have over the course of 2 years. So yeah.
Hmm. Maybe someone who, like, let's say, isn't as much of a team worker, or like is
Mm-hmm.
origin mentality, maybe
Mm-hmm.
you actually have like the steepest like learning curve at SP Jain because you're thrown into such an environment. And so maybe university is actually a time to sort of, this is just a thought I'm throwing out there, maybe university is actually a time
Mm-hmm.
to sort of throw yourself into an uncomfortable environment, get out of the comfort zone, because like
Mm-hmm.
these are those few years where you're super young, you're very adaptable generally
Correct.
versus 20 years down the line.
Mm-hmm.
It is probably like the best time to actually learn and grow when you're in the environment of just learning and studying and meeting people before you get
Mm-hmm.
into, like, the whole career or further education
Mm-hmm.
aspect. So
Correct.
that's what I will throw in there.
Mm-hmm.
I know Minerva also, and this is even for students who love Minerva like myself, there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of day-to-day challenges about just living in these different cultures and also moving consistently. Like if you were in Dubai for 4 years, maybe
Mm-hmm.
Dubai goes ahead and becomes your second home and there's familiarity after the first year. But as soon as you're
Sure.
getting familiar with Dubai, you're like jumping to Singapore and then you're jumping to
Correct.
Sydney.
Correct.
And so I know that there's like day-to-day struggles and day-to-day challenges. What have
Mm-hmm.
been some of those for you as an SPJ student?
I think the main challenge comes in, oh, for me, the main challenge is because I'm a very emotional person. I tend to get sort of moving when I spend my entire year in one country, especially with Singapore. I had developed a very deep attachment to the city in itself. So leaving was it was a roller coaster of emotions for me. But I think with Dubai, I had already sort of developed that. I knew that I would be leaving, right? So I had already prepared myself for it. So detachment is one thing. Second is traveling itself isn't really difficult, but with Sydney, especially finding an accommodation for us is now there's a house crisis going on in Sydney, so it wasn't the most easiest task. So finding accommodations is a bit of a hassle. But apart from that, I think I was able to adapt to both of these cities that I've traveled to hitherto very well. Dubai and Singapore, they're very amiable cities. So especially for students, they offer the best lifestyle. So I wouldn't really say I found it a challenge. So it was pretty good like that. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
As we begin wrapping up this episode, what I want to do is, and I know before we recorded, you told me that this was a challenging question, but I'm still going to ask it. Maybe this is a good challenging question to end with. It's challenging for most of us.
Mm-hmm.
What I want to do is fast forward 2 years in time in your case and ask you what do you actually see yourself doing after graduation?
After graduation, again, like I mentioned to you before, I've not thought about this in detail, but certainly because I've chosen finance, I plan to dive into investment banking or perhaps financial consulting, where I can sort of have the opportunity to tackle financial challenges because I really like when things get a little bit of, it has a little bit of complications. So I really love challenging myself. It helps me grow. So I'm excited to sort of leverage whatever I've learned here, all the skills to, sort of drive impactful decision making in perhaps a financial servicing company or whatever job, but finance, something related to finance, yes.
Awesome. So to end on a slightly more exciting and fast-paced note, what we'll do is we'll jump into the fast fire round of questions. So a
Okay.
few very quick questions, and the challenge for you is to keep your answers as brief as possible. So one sentence, one phrase, if you can. Sometimes it goes longer, then that's okay.
Okay.
Question number one is any one thing. There's a lot of beautiful things about SPG, and I hope the episode highlighted that. But
Uh-huh.
any one thing you might want to change about SPG.
One thing, I think I've mentioned this before, but the back-to-back project system, I don't know if they can change that. I'm pretty sure it's because we have to adapt to that sort of lifestyle, but where we are overwhelmed with tasks because that's how the corporate world works. But yeah, the back-to-back project system because it burns us out a bit. So yeah,
Hmm. Burnout is very real at university. Mental
yeah,
health is very important at university. Uh,
correct.
we don't have too much time on this episode, but I've other episodes at length. I've like talked about mental health and emotional well-being, especially when you're away from home, dealing
Mm-hmm.
with homesickness. That's a
Mm-hmm.
whole tangent I won't go down.
Mm-hmm.
Since you're a finance geek, I've over the last few months I watched some great finance films. I don't know how realistic they are, but I just enjoyed watching them a lot, even as a non-finance person. Any film recommendations specifically in the finance domain?
These are two popular films. Pretty sure everyone has come across them, but The Wolf of Wall Street for sure, and The Big Short. The Big Short. These two movies are something every finance geek would have already watched. But yeah, these are two things that come up in my head.
Super. No, both awesome movies.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think you'd be surprised. I know a lot of people who haven't heard of these two movies. Um, number three is I mean, I'm sure you've taken a lot of interesting classes and interesting projects over the first 2 years, but any one course or class that stands out because it was very fascinating or like it blew your mind.
Oh, this is a no-brainer. For me, it was operations management. I think a lot of SPJ students would answer the same thing. It's by this professor named Bowman Moradian. So he's called the god of operations in India. So you can just like search him up online and you're gonna get all the details about him. He was an incredible professor. It was truly an honor or a privilege learning from him. Yeah.
Okay, so you also talked about your favorite professor. That's like a part two answer as well to another like
Oh,
actual fast fire.
okay.
Perfect. One sweet memory from the last 2 years at SPGN.
There have been a truckload of memories because everything that you're doing with friends constantly becomes a memory, and it becomes nostalgic. But I think, yeah, there was this one time when we were given a break for 1 week, and we didn't have any plans as such. We in Singapore when we were in Singapore, but suddenly we were like, let's just go to Malaysia because it's a 5 hour drive from Singapore. So we planned it at the drop of a hat. It was very impromptu and in 3 hours, we were all ready and driving to Malaysia. So I think this is one sweet memory because I don't think I've ever done an international trip that impromptu. So yeah,
I hope college teaches like the planners to also be a bit more spontaneous in life and sometimes let go of plans and just go with the spur of the moment. I'm a huge planner, but I've had a lot of good memories when my
hmm,
friends forced me to just like leave the plans and sort of just get out and we'll figure it out as we go
correct,
along. Uh,
correct.
For the planners, that's one thing you learn in college that will be very
Hmm,
valuable in the college
hmm,
experience.
hmm.
Last of the fast fire. Again, this is a whole episode in itself, but university is not just a time of like intellectual transformation, but like personal transformation that is mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I think as a person, you actually become a new person from day one versus graduation. And
Yeah.
to highlight any one personal change you've seen in yourself over the last 2 years at SP Jain, anything that comes to mind.
The entire journey in itself has been very transformative. I would say it's almost like a metamorphosis.
Hmm.
But this is going to be more than a sentence. Just a note. One change is I think I would like to relate it with this famous quote. I think it's by Aristotle, which goes along the lines of an educated mind is able to entertain a thought without actually accepting it. So
Hmm.
this is something that I've learned during the course of 2 years. I was a bit stubborn and rigid, but I think 2 years of attending university and especially living away from home has sort of propelled me to adopt this character trait as much as possible. It's to listen to everyone and be able to accept it. You don't really have to entertain it, but just put yourselves in their shoes and, sort of understand where they're coming from. I think that's very, very important.
Hmm. I think running this podcast has taught me a lot of that skill. There's different
Hmm.
avenues through which you can learn that, but a lot of it is just talking to people, like physically putting yourself in situations where you talk to people who might have a different worldview than you. I feel like
Correct.
that's where actually the most of the learning comes from, versus
Correct.
talking to someone who agrees with you on everything. Those become
Yes.
friends, I'm sure.
Correct.
Someone who disagrees with you on literally everything, that's the
Hmm.
person you can actually learn something from. I think, especially if they come from like high intelligence and they have facts behind what they're saying. So
Correct.
I love what.
Also, my best friends and I, we have very opposite views about everything when it comes to politics, whether it be worldviews. But we've learned to find a common ground now, and we know that it's important to prioritize our friendship and let that aside. So yeah, it's taught me too much. Yeah.
Okay, that's
Mhm.
nice. Lastly, if you had to wrap up what's been a fast pace but a great episode, I think we've touched on a lot of ground. We started with SP Jain, what's unique about it, the traveling model, the application. We
Mhm.
went into academics. We're now just talking a little bit about friendship and personal growth. So I think we've covered a lot of ground over like pretty much the last hour. If you had to wrap up this episode with one final message for listeners, someone who's in high school about to work on the university application and dive into this new 3 or 4 year world of university and then enter life at large, any final words for listeners?
Yeah, it's that I think don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. This is what I was advised when I was living abroad, because I think we all do tend to have a lot of trepidations about everything, but especially when you're moving abroad, because you don't know how it's going to turn out. So I think it's important for you to be able to push yourselves to. I mean, I understand that home is easy. It's a lot of hand holding. You've got your parents around. Everything is easy, but try to push yourself out of that comfort zone. Explore the world. I think this is the age when we're able to do all that. So I think I can also ensure you that it's going to be a hell of a ride. You're going to embrace it. So just step out of your comfort zone. Yeah.
Mm, I love that. Yeah. Brilliant. Maybe there's a part two to this conversation. I feel like there is. I think there's a lot of unanswered questions, which I'm hoping listeners also have.
Mhm.
Maybe there's a part two of a different aspect of SPJ or sort of your SPJ journey. But I'm looking forward to that as well. For now, let's bring this episode to a wrap. Agamya, if a listener wants to contact you, reach out with further questions, just wants to connect and say hi, what's a good way to reach you?
They can contact me on Instagram. They can contact me on LinkedIn as well. My Instagram handle would be Agamya, that is Agamya dot double underscore. So this is my Instagram handle. You can reach out to me. Or LinkedIn, I think you can just type in Agamya Yogaraj. I think you'll find me. I think, yeah, that should be it.
Perfect, perfect. And I'll mention these in the episode description for sure. I'm hoping
Okay.
people reach out. Uh,
Mhm.
I would feel very, very gratified if someone listened to this episode and then ended up at SP Jain a year or two down the line and sort
Mhm.
of contacted you and said, I listened to your episode and look, now I'm here. I think that would be awesome for me as a host, for you as an SP Jain student as well.
Sure. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. That would bring a lot of contentment. Yeah.
awesome. Well, that was the episode.
Mhm.
Thank you for being on the podcast, Agamya. I learned a lot. It was also very fun. There were points where you challenged me intellectually, which I also appreciate.
Mhm.
But it was a pleasure to host you on Uni Unveiled.
It was such a pleasure to be here. It's my first time doing something like this, but I really, really enjoyed it. So thank you so much. And I must say, you're doing a great job, because I think all of the high schoolers are really anxious at this point. I recall being, if I were to go down my journey, I think I was really anxious. So, this opportunity for them to just listen to a podcast and be able to get insights about every university. That's really important, because especially when it's a podcast, you get so much more in detail than just someone who would have written a blog or an article on the same, right? So I think you're doing a great job. So kudos to you for that.
All right, that was the episode. To all the young listeners out there, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. And I hope you feel more energized, inspired, and curious for the exciting university journey that lies ahead. Stay tuned. Many more wonderful episodes to be released on Uni Unveiled across a diversity of majors, countries, institutions, and speaker profiles. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel Uni Unveiled. This podcast is just a small part of a much larger initiative undertaken by my family called Serene Strokes to spread positive sparks of growth, transformation, and joy among all our audience. Check out our official website www.serenestrokes.com. In the description and comments, please feel free to share other topics and questions which you would love to hear about from our different speakers on this podcast. Until then, take care and remember that this big word, university, may not be as scary or as intimidating as you think it is. Thank you for listening to Uni Unveiled.